This video is all about how to dominate the kitchen, how to love every meal, how to not spend a ton of time cooking, and how to eat food that makes you feel great and fuels your training and recovery. Welcome to the latest episode of the Tribal Training Podcast. This is going on Spotify and YouTube. I got a new style, a new presentation style that I'm breaking out. I got some 12 by 18. I got like an art pad, sketch pad, and I have written out all of my different kitchen hacks. And I'm hoping that these display well. I'm going to hold them up on the screen. If they don't, you'll be able to just listen through with me. And if they do, maybe you can pause at the moments that I hold these up and follow along a little bit more closely. Even if you're on Spotify, though, this is going to be pretty succinct. I am jazzed up on this because I've never actually shared all this info. Usually when I'm speaking to athletes on what to eat, I'm guiding them through understanding macros, sharing the tribal toast recipe on something that they can have before training. I'm talking to them about electrolytes, all that jazz. And this episode is actually inspired by a conversation that I had when I was onboarding an athlete in the past couple of weeks. And this athlete came to me and he was basically like, dude, I need some nutrition advice. I am basically just ordering DoorDash all the time. I'm getting Chipotle all the time. I am spending a little bit more money than I want to on food. And I'm stuck in this mindset where I am not looking forward to making anything. I'm viewing cooking as a huge chore. The food that I make doesn't really taste great, and I need some help. And so I'm like, boom, dude, let's get right into it. And what I shared with him has basically turned into the content that I'm going to share in this episode. And this is all around, we got art slide number 1. How do I dominate the kitchen? And this is really like the question that I've asked myself as I've overhauled how I even think about cooking and making food and having ownership over my ingredients. And there are 3 things that I demand. Number 1, I demand that I love every meal. I am not into having meals that I'm not looking forward to. I'm not into eating your standard bro chicken and rice meal prep shit. No, none of that. I want fresh food. I want to love every meal. Number 2 is that I want to not spend a ton of time cooking. Listen, I got a lot of shit I'm trying to take down. I'm trying to do Ironmans. I'm trying to run 100 miles. I'm a new dad. I own my own business. I'm not spending an hour in the middle of the day trying to be some chef boyardee in the kitchen, right? I'm in and out. I'm efficient. Let's go. And then number 3 is I want to eat food that makes me feel great and fuels my training and recovery. Those are my qualifications here. And I have ultimately put that under the label of how do I dominate the kitchen? Excuse me. This is what we're after. And so here is what I'm going to share. I'll give you kind of a rundown of what I'm going to get into in this chat. Number 1, tribal bowls. Making bowls is the easiest way to just feel freaking rock solid on your nutrition. We got salsas and sauces that we're going to get into. We got this idea of easy speed. So making meat and eggs, these are things that are made in under 7 minutes. I'm going to walk you through how I do batch rice. I'm not into meal prepping, but I am into batch rice. We'll talk about cold bowls that can be whipped up very quickly. Then we'll get into how do we actually make food taste great. 2 easy things here. Use tons of seasoning, especially tons of salt, and cook on high heat. Then some more speed in the kitchen. So we really want to be eating the same meals daily. Variety is a massive trap when it comes to nutrition. And then number 2 on speed in the kitchen is cleaning up as you cook. And these 2 things, they play off of each other. Eating the same meals and cleaning up as you cook. Because I'll tell you what, nothing deters me from making food that I love if when I finish eating, I've got a freaking mess of a kitchen that I've got to spend 15 minutes cleaning up. So I'm going to walk you through how I clean up as I cook. And then this is maybe my favorite hack that I have developed. Single serving grocery shopping for when I am out and about and I still want to be rock solid on my nutrition and my food intake. So this is just what I do, right? I'm not saying that this is some perfect protocol that you've got to follow. This is just what I have found works for me. And I have been tinkering with this approach really over the past 5 years, really. And this works just extremely effectively. I feel like I have extreme ownership over what I eat. I love all my meals and I check all those boxes. Let's get back to the how do I dominate the kitchen slide. I love every meal. The thing I don't have on here actually is that I demand that every meal is fresh food. The only thing that I'm reheating here is going to be the batch rice that I talk about. I don't spend a ton of time cooking. Every meal that I make, I would say that I make it in under about 10, 12 minutes, maybe max. Most of them are less than that. I'm usually finished eating. By the time that I started cooking to the time that I finish eating, it's usually in less than 15 minutes. And I eat food that makes me feel great, and it fuels my training and my recovery. So let's have a little bit of fun. Let's get into this. So where is my Tribal Bowls sheet here? Okay. So Tribal Bowls. So many of the meals that I make, I just whip them up into bowls. And how I think about bowls is I've got a meat, I've got a carb source, and then I can potentially add a sauce. Where is my sauce and my salsa sheet? Boom. So right here. So let's go through the meats that I use. And listen, if you want to go look up and find, some food charts that give you a million different options, you're welcome to do that. But I have found that that is overwhelming. And so I'm going to keep this very simple. And I'm just going to share with you what I eat. Like this is the Ryan Dreyer protocol here. So Tribal Bowls, the meats. I got 4 main meats that I rotate through. Number 1, eggs. Number 2 is ground beef. Number 3 is rotisserie chicken. And number 4 is frozen shrimp. Then the main carbs, I got 3 main carbs that I rotate through. Number 1 is batch rice. Number 2 is sourdough bread. And number 3 are tortillas. Now I get into salsas and sauces. So what are the salsas and sauces that I use? So salsas, you got an option for a green salsa, like a green chili salsa, or a red salsa. I really like the Primal buffalo sauce. Number 3 here is Indian, if I'm looking to have some Indian. And number 4 is a hummus. So right here, as I am thinking about constructing meals, all that I need to do is pick one from each 3 of these categories, right? If I'm thinking about breakfast, my standard breakfast right now is eggs and sourdough. I don't even have a sauce with it. So boom, that is right off of meal number 1. Then let's think about maybe a midday meal. That could easily be ground beef and rice, or that could be ground beef on tortillas. And if I wanted to add a salsa or a sauce with that, I could do that. I did some quick math here. I don't know my exact, I had to brush up a little bit on my calculations of how many varieties are here. But I believe that the math is correct, that if you've got 4 in one category, 3 in another, and then 5 in the salsa and sauce category, if you multiply 4 by 3 by 5, that comes out to 60. So I think that there are 60 different variations here. And basically, the overall idea is that this is the foundation of my diet. I'm thinking about meals from the standpoint of what's the meat that I'm going to add, what's the carb that I'm going to add, and if it's not just eggs and toast, which I really love, I'm going to add a sauce, right? So all of a sudden, it could be ground beef with batch rice, and I could put Primal buffalo sauce on it. That's one kind of meal. If I wanted to put salsa on that, I could do another kind of meal. If I wanted to do hummus on that, that's a totally different style bowl, right? And I feel like I'm jumping ahead a little bit because the main idea on speed in the kitchen is that you should be eating the same meals daily. And I think this is a massive trap that people fall into, is when they're chasing variety in their diet. They're weighing like so many different options for breakfast, so many different options for their lunch, and then lots of different options for dinner. And all of a sudden now they're wasting like a ton of mental energy just thinking about what they're going to be eating. And if you are someone in here who's, you're listening to this, like you're chasing big stuff, we got to be able to throw a lot of this food decision stuff on autopilot. And I got two athletes who are great examples of this, Mike Donatelli and Dylan Spina. These dudes are coaches themselves, and they are just dialed in. And it doesn't mean like Mike Donatelli, he loves ice cream. Like he has pleasure in his diet. Dylan Spina, he does like Sunday sauce. He has like pasta and homemade sauce every Sunday. He's got other things that he's into as well. But when we're talking like Monday through Friday and like standard stuff, you got to be able to just be stuck with a single meal for different times of the day that you can lean on for different blocks of time. Right. And I know that I also just said there's 60 varieties in the tribal bowls, but the idea is that you're picking one for your morning meal, and you're sticking with that for multiple weeks at a time, multiple months. You're picking something for your midday meal. Maybe you have two options for your midday meal. I'll talk through that in a few minutes, but you're sticking with that for multiple months. And then listen, when you get bored of that and you just want to change, okay, well, revert back to the bowls diagram. You just switch it up, right? Like maybe you've been having frozen shrimp for a while. Maybe you're getting tired of frozen shrimp. Okay, well, let's switch it up. We could do rotisserie chicken. We could do ground beef, right? But it's the idea that you are eating the same meals on a consistent basis. Okay, now let me just give you some examples of my current meals right now. I want to make sure I'm not losing track of what's going on here. So my first meal every day these days is 5 eggs, scrambled up in a pan. I add in a little sliver of goat cheese that I melt in with those, and then I do sourdough toast. And that takes me a total of like 7 minutes to make. I throw the toast in, got the pan on, throw the eggs in it, whip the eggs up. The meal is plated in less than 7 minutes. Then into my midday meal. So I actually haven't even talked about the cold bowls yet, but the cold bowls that are sort of another little hack is basically doing a Greek yogurt or a cottage cheese bowl. And for me right now, one of my midday meal options is a cottage cheese bowl with sliced pear, honey, and cinnamon. That is a cold bowl that I can make in like literally 3 minutes. At times in the past, I've done Greek yogurt bowls with a variety of seeds or bananas or almond butter, stuff like that. But if I'm in a situation where I'm not wanting to heat something up, the cold bowl is a great option. My other midday option right now, I don't know if I mentioned this just a second ago, but ground beef and rice, ground beef and batch rice with some of the Primal Buffalo sauce. Easy solve for me. Same deal with the eggs. Like the ground beef, I throw the pan on hot. I heat up the beef and sear that up in just a couple of minutes. And I've got the batch rice that I make heating up in a pot as well with a little bit of bone broth in there. So I'm losing my train of thought a little bit. I want to make sure that I'm like staying locked in on how I'm presenting all of this. So breaking meals down by this bowl structure, I just think it's extremely helpful for me when I'm thinking about what I'm having, right? Because I'm not all of a sudden trying to whip up like a freaking massive like recipe. It's like, boom, you make your meat, you make your protein, you add in the carb, and then if you want to mix it up with a sauce, go for that if you'd like to. Now, the next thing that's extremely important is cleaning up while I am cooking. So let me give you an example of how I make eggs in the morning. So I start off, I throw the sourdough in the toaster. I don't throw that on just yet. Next thing I do is I throw the pan on the stove and I start to heat that up. Then I grab a bowl and I crack 5 eggs into the bowl. Whip up the eggs. I've thrown some avocado oil and the slice of goat cheese into the pan, and that's starting to heat up. and then all of a sudden I dump in the eggs so they can start to cook up in the pan. Now, I don't just sit there and wait for the pan to cook while all of a sudden I'm just like letting the dishes that I've used sit there and wait till the end, right? And the other ingredients. Right away, the avocado oil is going back into the cupboard, the goat cheese log is going back into the fridge, and I am instantly cleaning up and wiping up the bowl that I used to scramble the eggs, and that is going into the dishwasher. So, boom. Now, all of a sudden, the situation is I've got the sourdough in the toaster. I turn that on. I've got the eggs and the goat cheese in the pan that's hot. These are cooking. And I've got one spatula that I'm using to mix these up. Okay, so next thing, we basically just wait for this to finish up cooking. Just keep scrambling the eggs. These are going to be made in under 7 minutes. Finish up with the eggs, grab the sourdough, plate those two things, and then I will clean the pan and I will clean the spatula before I eat. It takes like 30 seconds, but I'm telling you, this makes a world of a difference for me because I don't have this dirty sink with the dirty bowl that I spoke about that I used to whip up the eggs, the dirty pan, and then the dirty spatula. Sure, that's only 3 things, but what if I left those things in there? And then also, what if I didn't put away the avocado oil? What if I didn't put away the goat cheese log? What if I didn't put away the bag that had the rest of the sourdough? Like I threw that back on top of the fridge or in the freezer or wherever we're keeping it. So I'm cleaning up and I'm putting shit away in the process of this being made. And then I'm also taking an additional 30 seconds before I eat to make sure that the only thing that I have to do when I finish eating is wipe down my plate, put it in the dishwasher, and add my fork. That is a perfect example of how I am able to make a fresh meal, right? That was one of the demands. The demand was I'm making a fresh meal that I love. Check that box. Not spend a ton of time cooking. Those eggs took less than 7 minutes to make. The sourdough toasted in less time. And I'm eating food that makes me feel great and fuels my training and recovery. So right there off the bat, that takes care of every single box I am looking to check when I'm talking about dominating the kitchen. Now, let me give you a different example because when I was talking to this athlete that really kicked off this idea for this conversation, he was talking about how he loves breakfast tacos. I'm like, dude, breakfast tacos were just in my repertoire, but I just moved past them. I was doing them for 2 or 3 months, and now I've moved into the eggs and the sourdough because I just want to switch up. But here's what I was doing for making breakfast tacos. All right. Everything related to the eggs is the same. The only difference is that instead of sourdough being in the toaster, I am putting these corn and flour. They're a combo of corn and flour tortillas that I love. I get them at Sprouts. Really clean ingredients. I throw the oven on broil, and I toast up 3 tortillas, and these are cooking at the exact same time that the eggs are. Okay. And now when I was speaking to you about the eggs that I'm doing, right? I'm just doing eggs and sourdough. I'm not adding any other kind of sauce. But hey, listen, if we're doing breakfast tacos, we need a salsa up in here. So let's get back to the sauce sheet. Okay. I'm a big fan of green chili salsa on breakfast tacos. So my breakfast tacos, I got the corn and flour tortilla that I love. I got the eggs with a little bit of goat cheese in there. So smooth. And then I got some green salsa on top. And boom, every single thing about the dishes that I spoke about is the exact same here, right? The salsa is not an additional dish or an additional cooking utensil. I'm just scooping some salsa with a fork onto the tortillas with eggs right as I'm about to eat, right? And this athlete, he was telling me, yeah, I love when I've got avocado and maybe some beans and some cheese. And I'm like, yeah, man, like I'm down for that too. But I'm not willing to all of a sudden have like freaking 5 other things in these breakfast tacos if that's going to turn this kitchen into a freaking mess. Like, dude, I know when I make tacos or we make tacos for dinner, it's like we got freaking all kinds of stuff going on in the kitchen. Every single pot is somehow being used. We got serving bowls, all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, dude, this is like 9 a.m. in the morning. Like I'm between workouts or I'm between athlete calls or I'm trying to do some shit with my son. Like I'm not looking to have this turn into a 30-minute production. So broiling the egg tacos or the tortilla shells, that was a huge unlock for me. Same exact concept as toasting the sourdough. Okay. That was just a good example. So now let me get into, because that's the idea of eating the same meals daily and cleaning up as you cook, right? So this is speed in the kitchen. Let's get back to this slide here. All right. So same principles apply. Eat the same meals daily and then clean up as you cook. And the next thing that I'll say on this is that this has allowed me to get very efficient with understanding what are the cooking utensils and the pots and pans that I need to use. And I'm just like getting really intuitive with like, okay, well, if it's either of those egg meals, all it's going to be is the bowl that I whisk the eggs in. I use the spatula that I will cook the eggs with to whisk them in the bowl. So I'm getting the bowl taken care of right away. Then it's the same pan every time. It's the same spatula every time. And I'm putting away the other things, the avocado oil, the goat cheese, the bag of the other sourdough loaves or the other sourdough slices, or the tortilla bag or the salsa. Like that is coming out and going in right as it's being used. And just getting into that flow has been huge for me. Okay, now let me get into the batch rice. So that breakfast example is pretty simple, but let me get into this batch rice unlock because this has actually been a new addition over the past 6 months. So this idea actually came from Brandon. Shout out to Brandon. We were in Oregon at Oregon 70.3. We were staying in an Airbnb together, and Brandon introduced me to making rice with bone broth and a ton of seasoning that unlocked my world on making rice. So I already mentioned that I'm not into meal prepping. Like I'm not making these meals and putting them in these Tupperwares and then like heating them up. Like that totally does not have me looking forward to what I'm eating. When I'm looking forward to what I'm eating fresh food. Like that's what I love, right? The one exception that I will make to that is I make batch rice. So anytime that I'm making rice, I will make 3 cups of dry rice, which I have no idea what that equates to when it's cooked out, but it fills up basically the biggest Tupperware in the dryer house. So I'm like, sweet, we're loaded in here, and this can handle probably 5 to 7 meals worth of rice for me. So how do I make the rice? Shout out to Brandon here. Basically, 3 cups of rice and a full carton of bone broth. I use bone broth instead of water. Immediate unlock on flavor. And then I am adding in a ton of salt, a ton of pepper, a ton of garlic powder, and a ton of onion powder. Sometimes I will even get a little wild, add a little turmeric, or even add some rosemary. That's a little optional. But that idea of making that batch rice, and I typically just make it like if I am going to be making a beef and rice bowl, I'm going to need to make rice. If I'm out of rice, I will just make a full batch of it instead of just making one serving. Then I put that into the fridge in the Tupperware. And the dryer house, we do not even have a microwave. We didn't have one when we bought this house, and we've just been rolling on with pots and pans. And it's been no issue for me. So I am basically just grabbing a small pot. I add a little bit more bone broth into it. I scoop in some rice, and that heats up. And the same principle from the eggs and the breakfast of the sourdough or the tortillas toasting up and warming up quicker than the meat, right? The eggs there. Same concept here applies when I am making a bowl that includes batch rice. So the most standard bowl that I do with batch rice is ground beef. So ground beef, how am I making it? I'm throwing a pan on the stove. I'm putting it to high heat, and I am just mashing. Once that's hot enough, I am mashing, a half pound, 3/4 of a pound of beef into this pan. Meanwhile, the pot is right next to it. The batch rice is heating up. And now all of a sudden, I'm still adding a ton of seasoning to the ground beef. Same things I mentioned before: salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder. Then I'm adding it to the batch rice, or I'm plating it into a bowl together. And then, boom, let's get back to the salsas and sauces slide. So here's where we start to add the variety that I like, right? Because sometimes I will do this with a green chili salsa that I love. The Primal Buffalo sauce is a little bit more standard for me, but I've even been doing this with some hummus lately, almost making it like a Mediterranean style meal. And again, the longest thing to cook here is the ground beef, which, similar to the eggs, like I cook this up and it's done in less than 7 minutes. So by start to finish of this meal, I am started to all food consumed in under 15 minutes. Now, let's think again about the principle of cleaning as we cook. So in this situation, if I'm making a beef and a rice bowl, I'm not going to be able to clean those pans until, of course, the food is finished and plated. But the same principle applies. I throw the rice, I take the rice from the pot, put it into the bowl that I'm going to use, and then quick clean in the sink and put it on the drying rack. Maybe the beef has finished cooking for a few more seconds while I'm doing that. Next thing I do, put the beef on top of the rice in the bowl, and I clean the pan. Then at that point, I'm done with any of the utensils, the spatula or the tongs that I've used. So I clean those as well. And now everything that I've cooked with is sitting on the drying rack before I even eat. Now, maybe I'm grabbing, let's just say, the green chili salsa, because that's going to use a fork to scoop it out. I'm using the same fork that I'm about to eat with, right? So these same principles of eating the same meals, cleaning up as you cook, like these have been the massive unlocks for me. And then also just really simplifying the meat options. I haven't really been doing frozen shrimp too much lately, but that would be another meat option if I wanted to just like mix it up a little bit. That would be the same protocol as the ground beef, cooking it up in a pan, eventually putting it over rice. But there was a point in time where I was doing frozen shrimp on top of tortillas. Like I was doing some seafood style breakfast tacos or just like lunch tacos, and that would be the same thing. Frozen shrimp, of course, you thaw it out, right? So I would have had to prep that, just leave it in some warm water for a while. But then I'm putting them into the tortillas that are being heated up the exact same way. They're going on broil in the oven. And those things heat up on broil even quicker than a toaster. And then all of a sudden, I like to add some green chili salsa to those as well. Okay. So let's just go back and let me just make sure that I'm covering all the bases here, because this hasn't been mapped out exactly the way that I thought, but I think I'm getting all the info out. So let's get back to the initial slide. How do I dominate the kitchen? This is the question that I'm asking. Well, dominating the kitchen for me, it means that I love every meal. I didn't really include here that every meal's made fresh, but that is a massive demand from me. I am not into meal prep and reheating a Tupperware of like portioned out food that just looks so just unmotivating, man. Talk about not loving your process, man. I like finish a workout and imagine this. You go out and you've got a 30-30 run. I love 30-30s. They're my favorite speed workout. 15-minute warm up. Then I got 20 rounds of 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds easy. Then I got 15-minute cool down, something like that. Let's say that I crush that workout. I'm feeling like $1,000,000. Let's go, man. I'm building here. I'm getting faster. I'm feeling strong. I just cranked that thing out. You want to know what would deflate my balloon of enthusiasm? Opening up the fridge and grabbing a pre-portioned Tupperware of some already cooked meat, some freaking pre-cooked vegetables, maybe a scoop of rice, and like throwing that in the microwave. Oh, what a boring freaking existence, man. No, I'm crushing that workout. I'm ripping my 30-30s. I'm coming back and I'm making fresh food that I freaking love. Let me tell you about this morning. I didn't have 30-30s. I had a 45-minute endurance run. Easy run, but it went great. I'll tell you the biggest win is that I ran with Jameson, Mr. Pig, and he didn't have to stop once to pee or relieve himself with a number 2. We ran straight for 45 minutes, no stops. My pace was great. My heart rate was great. I got it done in the morning. Sun was rising. I'm like, let's go. I get back to the house, and I am making my standard breakfast. 5 eggs with goat cheese and 2 slices of sourdough. And the exact protocol that I walked you through, I executed this morning. Absolutely loved what I had. And man, just felt like $1,000,000 in the process. So loving every meal, not spending a ton of time cooking, which to me, on the back end of not spending a ton of time cooking, the real unlock there is not leaving a sink full of dirty dishes. Like for me, that has been the thing, because you're spending the same amount of time cooking no matter whether you're cleaning the dishes or not. It's just a matter of, are you being efficient and getting some shit done at the same time that you can, or are you just freaking pushing everything down the road and saying, I'll deal with it later? Right? So not spending a ton of time cooking and eating food that makes me feel great and fuels my training and recovery. I mean, I checked every single box this morning. So boom, boom, boom. Let's go. Okay. So we spoke about, of course, the whole idea of the tribal bowls. You got your meats. My meats right now, let me flash the slide. My meats right now: eggs, ground beef, rotisserie chicken, frozen shrimp. My carbs are batch rice, sourdough, and tortillas. And then my sauces and my salsas. Two kinds of salsas that I'll rotate around between: green salsa or red salsa, primal buffalo sauce, Indian. We've been on a good Indian kick lately. And then adding a little bit of hummus. The other thing I didn't mention within the tribal bowls is the idea of rotisserie chicken. That's a pretty big staple in the dryer house. Chelsea has actually been the one that's inspired that. She will very often just get like 2 rotisserie chickens, and we've just got them in the fridge. She'll break them down and then put them into a larger Tupperware. So if I'm like really in a rush and maybe don't even have time to heat up a meal or make a meal right on the stove, but I also don't want to go with a cold bowl, I can easily grab some rotisserie chicken that's already basically portioned out in the breasts or in a chicken leg. We spoke about eating the same meals daily. So for me right now, right, what did I say? I said my breakfast meal, I already walked you through it 3 times, eggs and sourdough. Then my midday meal, I'm either working with a cold bowl that's cottage cheese, pear, honey, and cinnamon, or I'm making a beef and rice bowl. I'm not doing a ton of the frozen shrimp right now. I'm not doing a ton of the rotisserie chicken right now, but those are options that I could easily bounce back with, right? Like if I get tired of this stuff, it's the end of March right now. Maybe I'm into April. Maybe finally I'm like, I've kind of had it on the beef and rice. I'm not crazy about that right now. Okay, boom. Switch it up, rotisserie chicken and rice. Maybe I add a sauce or a salsa into there, and now all of a sudden I've got a totally new meal. All right. And then cleaning up as you cook. I mean, that's the massive unlock. We cannot be leaving a whole freaking sink of dirty dishes. That is going to have us not loving this process. Okay. I'm going to get to the single serving grocery soon, because that is maybe the biggest unlock. Because I hear from guys all the time, oh, I was just out and either if guys aren't recovering from their fueling, it's because they're out and they're like not eating all day, or they're out and they choose shitty options. I've loosely touched on this idea of how do you make great tasting food. In my experience, number 1 is add tons of seasoning. I specifically add a ton of salt. Salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder. I am not like shaking these in with like a couple of flicks of the wrist. I am like holding these things upside down. Like it looks like an hourglass that's been shattered and the freaking sand is just running down. Like that's what it looks like, whether I'm making the batch rice, whether I'm making the ground beef, or whether I'm adding salt and pepper to my eggs. Like I really, really season it up. Also spoke a bit on high heat here. I would say that this applies. Well, I'll tell you how I make eggs. I make eggs by starting with the pan on like medium to medium high heat. Throw the eggs in, they start to sizzle, but then I turn the heat down. And then I even eventually will turn the heat off as I am scrambling them and they're cooking through. Certainly not trying to overcook my eggs at all. But I'm also not just like having everything cook on low, because I feel like in my experience, high heat adds some texture to food that really makes a big deal. I've specifically found this when I'm making ground beef. When I'm doing ground beef, like I am literally using my hand and I am mashing the ground beef into the pan, and I've waited for it to heat up. That's another hack on the high heat, is you put it on high heat and then you wait for it to heat up so that when you add the eggs or you add the ground beef or you add the shrimp, same deal here for shrimp, it's sizzling up. We're not allowing, like, ground beef is the perfect example. You know how different ground beef tastes if you have the pan on high heat and you wait until it's searing hot to add the ground beef, compared to the pan like being on low heat and slowly heating up as it's heating the ground beef. The ground beef becomes like this pathetic gray that, again, is just like, no flavor. just so like unmotivating. If you're eating that kind of ground beef and you're making that kind of ground beef, I would understand why Chipotle sounds really appetizing. It's because your skills in the kitchen are weak, dog. We got to get some high heat up in here. This is also true. I'm not really speaking at all in this on what Team Dryer does for dinners, but this is absolutely true if you're grilling. If you're grilling anything, I mean, rule number one, steaks, burgers, is you got to get that thing up to like 500, 550 before you put the meat on the grill. Same concept applies with cooking meat in a pan. Okay, now let's get to easy speed. And then after this, we're going to go to single serving grocery shopping. So, easy speed. Meat and eggs are both cooked in under 7 minutes. And the other things that are part of that meal are cooked in less time than that. Whether it's the sourdough, whether it's the batch rice being heated up, whether it's the tortillas in the oven, like under 7 minutes. We got no excuses here. And then if we're pairing that with the 30 seconds to clean the pan and clean the spatula or the tongs before we actually eat, then when we finish eating, we literally have a completely clean kitchen. And all we've got to do is rinse off the plate we used, rinse off the fork, and throw it into the dishwasher, and we are on with our day. I would also add shrimp into this. Shrimp, I mean, literally, you're not supposed to cook shrimp for more than like 3 or 4 minutes, I think, or else it just becomes super, super tough. Easy speed, also the batch rice. I mean, I already spoke about that. Batch rice, sourdough, tortillas, those are all heated up or toasted in less time than the meat takes. And then number 3 on easy speed is the cold bowls. So cold bowls, I already spoke through what mine are right now, right? Cottage cheese. I never really was a big cottage cheese guy, but my son Jack, we're feeding him cottage cheese and it's in the house and I've started eating it and it's freaking amazing. Cottage cheese, sliced pear, honey drizzle, cinnamon sprinkle. That is literally made in 3 minutes. And I literally probably eat that in less than 3 minutes. And so it's like, boom, man, that's an easy meal. Now, the other thing that I'm going to mention with this is that I work from home and I'm home all day, right? But these same principles can be applied to somebody who needs to travel somewhere if they're going into an office. Cold bowls can be your staple. It's easy to bring cold bowls. You might need to get into a situation where you're doing a ground beef and rice bowl, and maybe you're heating that up in your office's lunchroom in the microwave. But you can still then add some fresh sauce, and that can be an appetizing meal, right? So I don't want to hear this nonsense of, yeah, you know, this works for you, but I have this different situation. Like, no, man, let's adapt and overcome. If you got to be in the office, okay, well, let's think about what the average person does in an office. They take their lunch break and they're deciding between like 7 different meal options. Oh, I could go and I could get Chipotle. Or back when I used to work in Philly, it was like, oh, we could go to Sweet Green, or we could go to this ramen place, or we could go to Kava. And like, those aren't like bad options, but I think there's a lot of value in just sticking with simple food that you're eating very consistently. You're eating the same meals all the time. And then listen, if you want to mix it up every couple of weeks, just mix it up. No one said you got to eat this forever. Okay, that's enough of that. On to, this is my biggest unlock. This is literally my biggest hack. Single serving grocery. So I was talking to some friends. I was with some friends last week, and they were talking, and they were basically saying, like, isn't it crazy how expensive fast casual has gotten? Like Chipotle or Five Guys, right? Like, not exactly McDonald's or Wendy's, but you know, in that kind of higher quality echelon of, it's still fast food, but you're probably not going through the drive-through, right? Chipotle, Five Guys, Kava, Sweet Green, I would put all those in that category. And I was like, yeah, I mean, isn't it like pretty much $20 for a meal? And they're like, yeah. And so I was like, well, here's just what I do. Like, I just go to Whole Foods and I just get food that I can eat right there. And I didn't articulate this well enough because their first comment back was, yeah, but like that still gets pretty expensive too, like their hot bar. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 not the hot bar. Like, I literally go into the grocery store and I just get food that I could eat right in their sitting area. Now, let me give you some examples because this comes up for me a lot. Because I'm very often like, maybe I'll go do a run in the mountains, or I'm out at a trail, or maybe I'm just like moving around and out and about throughout the day. Like I just said that I'm home for most of the day, but I don't know. There are also plenty of days that I'm out and about, and I don't want to wait all day to eat. And I don't want to go to a Chipotle. Like I don't even really do that anymore. The only time that I'll ever have Chipotle is like maybe if we're on a road trip. And that's not so much because I'm like anti Chipotle. It's just because I freaking love this protocol that I'm on of single serving grocery shopping. So here's what I do. The protein options, very similar to other stuff that I'm eating at home. Protein options: Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, or rotisserie chicken. Now, Greek yogurt or cottage cheese, like you can just go to the back of the store, and the same way that they sell the family size Greek yogurt, like they sell all the single sizes, and they're like literally $1.50, like maybe $2. Rotisserie chicken, like a rotisserie chicken is like $11 at Whole Foods, I think. Like I'm not afraid to get a rotisserie chicken and just sit in their seating area and just pick it apart. And maybe I'm not having the whole thing, but like that's really quality food that fills me up, feels great, tastes amazing. It's hot, it's ready to go. Boom, I'm locked in. So the protein options that I go with: Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, rotisserie chicken. There's this Icelandic Greek yogurt. There's a coconut one. I don't even know the name of the brand, but it's in like this teal package, this little teal carton. It's a single serving, and it's freaking amazing. And I'll get like two of those, or the cottage cheese. Like they have the single serving cottage cheeses. I'll just get two of those. Like again, these things are like $1.50, so it's like $3. And now all of a sudden, it's giving me like the macronutrients of like a fully plated meal, because that is basically what it is. Then I will pair that. So let's get back to this list here. Okay. Hopefully you can see this. I will pair that with, maybe I'll get 2 bananas. Maybe I'll get a carton of blueberries. It's Sumo orange season right now. If you haven't had Sumo oranges, they're freaking amazing. I'll get a Sumo orange or two. So I've got some protein from the Greek yogurt, the cottage cheese, the rotisserie chicken. I've got some carb sources from some fruit, right? Bananas, blueberries, Sumo oranges. And then I will usually add in a drink. Maybe that's like a coconut water or chocolate milk, right? And I have literally checked out, and these meals are like $7. And I am literally parked in Whole Foods, grab the stuff, check out, sit at their seating area, eat it, and back in my car in easily under 15 minutes. Absolutely easily. More likely than not, under 10 minutes. And this is just cost effective as hell, man. Like these things are literally like $7 or $8 for all this food. Like the most expensive things on here, I mean, I get like the liter size of coconut water. I think that's $4.99 for the organic one. The Sumo oranges, those are kind of expensive. So those might be like $2 each, expensive relative to other fruit. But like 2 bananas, I think that's literally less than $1. Like bananas are like 49 cents a pound. A thing of blueberries, I mean, those are like at most $4.99 a pound, or $4.99 a carton, usually on sale, dollar off, $3.99 a carton. The Greek yogurt, the cottage cheese, I already mentioned, those are like $1.50, maybe like $1.79. They're not more than $2. The most expensive thing on here easily would be the rotisserie chicken. And even if I'm getting a rotisserie chicken, that's sort of a rare circumstance if I'm like freaking starving and I haven't had much protein today. Otherwise, I'm usually checking the box with the Greek yogurt, the cottage cheese, and then the fruit. But like, this is just so simple. And again, like, I'm not having to deal with some fast food spot. I'm not having to deal with like someone serving out my portions. I'm not having to go to a restaurant where like, the ingredients maybe aren't the cleanest. Like, I'm rock solid on this stuff. I have complete control. And the other thing that I love with the Greek yogurt and the cottage cheese is that like you can get a plain one, right? So maybe there's no carbs in it. So it's just protein and fat. You could get a plain one that's no fat. So all of a sudden it's literally pure protein Greek yogurt, if you wanted to be manipulating your intake like that. But if you're just looking for a more balanced meal, like, yeah, I mentioned the that coconut flavor of the Greek yogurt I love. Pair it with some blueberries, maybe pair it with a chocolate milk. Chocolate milk is pretty balanced in terms of its protein, carbs, and fat ratio. And like, dude, you're in and out of freaking Whole Foods in like 10 minutes. you've spent like $8 and you have a great meal. So this overall, these are my kitchen hacks. Kitchen and just food hacks. Let me just try to summarize some of this. Again, how do I dominate the kitchen? I got to love every meal. I got to be eating fresh meals. I do not spend a ton of time cooking, and I eat food that makes me feel great and fuels my training and recovery. Boom. Every single thing that I've mentioned here takes care of all that. How do I make food that tastes great? I use a ton of seasoning. A ton of seasoning. If you think that you've used too much, use more. Like, that's my thoughts on seasoning, especially salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, high heat. We got to get some texture added to our food. Oh man, nothing makes me want to just go to Chipotle more than my ground beef being cooked on low, being that gray, no flavor, no even real color. Avoiding that at all costs. Easy speed, so meat and eggs, and I'd add shrimp in here. These are cooked up in less than 7 minutes. You've got the batch rice idea. The sourdough or the tortillas, those are toasted in less time than the meat takes to cook. You got the cold bowl option. The cold bowl can always be made in just a couple of minutes. Then how are we talking about speed in the kitchen? Okay, so we're sticking with the same meals. Back to the art slide. Eat the same meals and clean up as you cook. I am not into finishing my meals and having a kitchen that I got to clean up. That takes way too much time, and that's just not an efficient use of our time. Like, let's go. Let's lock in here. Tribal bowls. Boom. We got the meats are eggs, ground beef, rotisserie chicken, and frozen shrimp. The carbs are batch rice, sourdough, or tortillas. And then we got all the salsas and sauces. I'm also really picky about my ingredient intake. This isn't really like a nutrition philosophy chat, but I'm very particular about the ingredients of the salsas and the sauces that I use. So I'm not doing like ketchup, where the first ingredient is high fructose corn syrup and sugar. Like, no, all this stuff is really simple. I get salsas that are basically just like the vegetables and spices. The Primal Buffalo sauce, super clean ingredients. Indian sauce, really, really clean stuff as well. And you can choose hummus that's really, really simple. No canola oil, no seed oils, none of that junk. And then the thing that has revolutionized my control on the go, single serving grocery shopping. Walk in the store, man, and buy something that's just a single serving. Like, people buy freaking 5 single serving Chobanis to take to work for the week, right? Like, why can't you just buy 1 or buy 2 to eat right there? Boom, locked in. The proteins that I like specifically are Greek yogurt or cottage cheese or rotisserie chicken. The carbs that I get most often, fruit carbs, bananas, blueberries, sumo oranges, and then the drinks. I'll almost always get a coconut water, and sometimes I'll get a chocolate milk depending on what I got going on. Those are my kitchen hacks. That's how I control what I take in. That's how I love what I eat. And that's how I eat fresh food. If you got any feedback on this, if you got questions on this, come hit me up. Really pumped to just share this, though, and excited to get this live. Thank you for hanging with me for 48 minutes here. Peace.